The reality is growth without quick profit or payback period can burn through your cash reserves. And unless you have a solution for that, like let's say that you're bringing in factoring, a third-party investor, you can end up in a very bad situation even with high growth. The solution is a simple framework that tells you real non-marketing cost per customer, lifetime value, and your lifetime value with your cash flow, your actual marketing efficiency, and the max CAC or cost to acquire a customer that you can actually afford to be profitable. I also put together a free marketing metrics workbook with the formulas we're going to use throughout this course. They're built directly in it. You can download it using the link in the description below to follow along. All right, so in the last video, we laid out the roadmap, thinking about marketing like a CEO. Step 2 in that journey is to understand your cost per customer that is not related to marketing. Because if you don't know what it costs to deliver to a customer, you really can't start making any smart decisions about how much to spend to get a customer. Reminder, in the link below, you should download the workbook and that'll really help to follow along. So to dive in, the foundation that everything else builds on, lifetime value, ROAS, ultimately your cost to deliver to a customer. I'm saying it that way because it differentiates it from CAC, which is cost to acquire a customer. That is the foundation everything else is built on. So your lifetime value, your ROAS, even the maximum you're willing to spend for your cost to acquire a customer, really it doesn't matter unless the numbers here make sense. So some of the things that we want to avoid are you want to avoid overestimating your margins. And you want to make sure that you avoid thinking that every sale is free money after covering your product cost. These are landmines that a lot of business owners step on. The right way to think about it is every cost, indirect or direct, needs to be accounted for and at the end of the day paid for by your customers. And that is the only way that you can make smart decisions to drive your growth. All right, so step 1. We're going to talk about variable cost per customer. So this is a cost that changes directly with every sale. So some examples are a physical product, your cost of that physical product, your cost of delivery for it, so your shipping cost. It could also be your payment processor fees. It could be your commissions to sales reps. It's anything that floats depending on the volume of sales or money coming in the door. All right, so now I'm going to be pulling up that workbook so we can go through these formulas together. All right, so I'm going to go to the cost tab here. And if we look at the calculator, we can see our inputs. So total variable costs in a given period, these are going to, again, be all of those costs that float up and down depending on volume. And then we're also going to put in our total fixed cost in the same period. We're going to use an e-commerce product as an example today. So let's say that your cost of goods sold is $30,000, your shipping is $5,000, and then payment fees are another $500. So we have $35,500. There's obviously other expenses that might be involved in a real e-commerce business, but we're just going to narrow it down to that for this example. So I'm going to put in $35,500. And then let's say that we had 500 customers in this period. So that gives us a total variable cost per customer of $71. So what we're doing is basically we're dividing our total variable costs in the period divided by customers in that period that were serviced, and we're getting our total average per customer. Again, this is an average number. It doesn't have to be exact for each one. They could be a bit higher, a bit lower, but as long as we're representing it on average, we're going to be okay here. So let's go over what fixed cost per customer actually is. Fixed costs are costs that don't change directly with each sale, but they still have to be covered. Examples can include rent, utilities, software subscriptions. It can also include salaries, not hourly wages, but salaries for your non-sales staff. This is where you can actually end up in a bit of trouble if you're considering it a fixed cost, because there is economies of scale to watch out for. So meaning if you have a salaried individual, whether they handle 1 order or 500 orders, you're paying the same thing. However, let's say that their maximum capacity to handle per week is 500, and then you start to go to 550, 600. Now you're going to incur another fixed cost of hiring another one of those salary employees to go and handle the overhead, and it won't be efficient until you go and bring them to maximum capacity. So that is one of the pitfalls to think about, but salaries generally do fall under fixed costs for that reason. It could also include things like insurance or admin cost. So let's say that we have $10,000 in rent for our warehouse, and that's the only cost we're going to include here. So now we've got $20 there that is included from our fixed cost per customer. The way to think about fixed cost is similar to economies of scale. So it's very much something that the more customers you have than that single fixed cost can take, the less expensive it's going to be per customer. However, there usually is diminishing returns after a while where you hit so many customers that can support, and then you have to incur more fixed costs. So that is something to be wary of. Just a quick reminder, if you want to follow along with the rest of the series and learn how to connect these numbers, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a like so more business owners like you can find it. All right, so let's cover some common mistakes to avoid. You have to avoid treating fixed cost as if it's free after it's been covered. It still affects margins, and again, it is something where you can end up reaching the end of scale for that fixed cost, and then you need to incur another fixed cost. So that's something to be wary of. Another potential pitfall could be ignoring cost differences between customer segments and products. You can have one segment that is actually doing significantly better than others. Again, we're not going to dive into that level of detail today because we do have a lot to cover. That is something that if you are looking into your own data, you would want to start at a high level like we are today. And then once you have a baseline, you would want to increase the level of granularity that you're looking at as you need to refine things further. So some key takeaways. For one, knowing your true cost will stop guesswork, even beyond marketing. If this helped you get clarity on your cost per customer, drop a like below, and if you haven't already, subscribe. Also, if you want my help directly to walk you through running these numbers or to dive in with more granularity for your business, you can head to zacharysenz.com and book a one-on-one consulting session with me. Link is in the description below. Now we're ready to look at the other side of the equation, which is what is a customer even worth to you over their lifetime? And what does the cash flow look like for that customer as well? So remember, there is a worksheet to follow along. I recommend downloading in the link below. Make sure to hit that subscribe button below and give this video a like so more business owners can find it. So what is LTV and why does it matter? LTV is the total amount of revenue or profit you expect from a customer over the entire relationship with your business. So this is what makes up lifetime value. And why it matters for CEOs and business owners is, for one, it sets the ceiling for your marketing spend, and it also shows which channels and customers are the most valuable. And lastly, it does guide upsell and retention strategies, especially targeting who to do that to if you segment out which of your customers have the highest LTV. So without knowing your LTV, you might underinvest and miss growth opportunities or overspend and grow at a loss without realizing it. So there is another side to LTV that is not always discussed, and that is the cash flow of LTV. Because you can have an LTV, let's say that it is $20,000. But if your cash flow looks like you're making $1,000 a year for the first 3 years, and then you're making the rest of that $17,000 in the 4th year, you probably have a cash flow problem, even if your LTV is quite high. So now I'm going to pull up that worksheet, and that way we can run through an example here. So currently I have pulled up our cost per customer. So right now we've got 35,000 here for our total variable cost. We've got our fixed cost of 10,000, and we still have the $71 per customer here, fixed cost of $20 per customer there. So now I'm going to go to the second tab, so LTV and cash flow. First, we're going to find our AOV. You're going to start with your total revenue from your purchases. So let's keep it simple and say that you have $10,000 in this period for purchases. That could be a month, it could be a year, it could be 5 years. we're just setting whatever our time frame is, and we're putting in our revenue for it. And then we're going to put the number of purchases overall. It doesn't matter if they were one-time purchases or anything else in that period. Let's say, just to make this easy, 100. So we now have our AOV, and that's been inputted here automatically. Then for purchase frequency and customer lifespan, this you're going to have to look at your historical data for. So you want to see overall, and this might be easier to pull if you have something like Shopify. It might be harder if you're a service business, but how many times did a customer order on average? And over what period of time was that? So again, this is an average. You're going to have some customers where they ordered once and they lasted a month. And then you might have others that lasted 10 years and they've ordered 100 times. You are going to basically need to take all of that data and just run the averages on it. Generally, you can do this pretty easily by getting an export from if you have the data in Shopify, or if you've kept track of all of your service calls, anything like that, you would basically want to use that to figure it out. And you would take frequency. So you're essentially either going and looking at all of the order data and literally just grouping it based on customer and finding the frequency that way. Or you would need to go and take an average of, okay, we have this many customers. The youngest of them, it lasted only a month. The oldest lasted 10 years. And basically, you're going to add up the time frame that all of those customers have been there, divided by the number of customers, and you'll find your average lifespan. And then you could basically take your order data per year and divide that by the number of customers in that year to find the purchase frequency value. And let's say that these are repeat customers. So realistically, let's say that on average, they're ordering 4 times a year. And then again, on average, they're lasting 3 years as a customer. And CAC, I'm going to just put in $200 for now. We'll dive further into CAC in the next video. But again, this is your cost to acquire a customer. And right now we're going in blind and we're just saying that is what is currently happening, not that we have calculated that it is a good thing. So let's say that our CAC is 200. So we enter that there. So scrolling down, we can see that we still have our variable cost per customer, our fixed cost per customer. And then on top of that, we've got our gross lifetime revenue. So this is $1,200, and this is calculated based off of your AOV times your purchase frequency times your lifespan. And again, this is gross LTV. So this doesn't say whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. This is just what is a customer actually worth to you. Then from there, we're dividing that out to the monthly revenue on average over that lifetime. And then the total cost to recover. So again, this will be a deeper dive in the next video. But essentially, your cost to acquire a customer plus your variable cost plus your fixed cost, that's your total cost invested into servicing this customer. And we're looking at $291, whereas again, their first order was only $100 here. In this example, you're making $909 per customer after all of your costs. That's amazing. But if it takes you almost 9 months or to see any of that become a profit, you've got to have some way to cash flow that. So in an example like this, you'd almost have to resort to factoring for it to make any sense. Whereas if we could get that down to 3 months, then it's a lot more feasible. So just to recap, your payback period is how long until your cumulative profit covers your cost of acquisition and your variable cost and your fixed cost allocated to that customer. A shorter payback period means faster reinvestment and the ability to grow quicker. Whereas a longer payback period means that you need more working capital, or your only other option is to grow slowly. So a homework assignment for you, how to actually calculate your LTV and cash flow in practice. So what I want you to do is pull your last 12 to 36 months of sales data, figure out your average order value. You would do that by dividing out your overall orders divided by the number of clients in that time frame. So for purchase frequency, you would basically go and look at either the raw data and take an average from it, or you could look at your overall number of purchases divided by that customer base in that time frame. And then the same thing for lifespan. You would basically want to average out the lifespan of your client list. And then from there, enter it into the calculator that I've provided with the worksheet. And that way you could follow along. So some common mistakes, not factoring churn or one-time buyers. You still need to include them in your calculations because that will actually affect the maximum you could really pay for a customer and the overall real lifetime value of one. And then, of course, ignoring the speed of revenue collected. As we saw in our example, you can have a very profitable model that is very slow to become profitable. Now we're going to look at a metric that has every ad agency loves to brag about, but might be a bit hollow. It's ROAS, or your return on ad spend. Here's the truth. ROAS is just the start. By itself, it can make you think you're winning when you're actually losing money. I hear ad agencies tossing around all the time that we're going to get you a 4x ROAS, meaning that for every dollar you spend on advertising, you'll get 4 back. However, that paints only half the picture. So today we'll break down what ROAS really means, why it can be misleading, and how to connect it to profitability and your ROI timing so you can make the right marketing decisions. So if you've been following the series and want to see how all of these numbers connect into a profitable marketing plan, hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and hit that bell icon so more business owners can find it. So what does ROAS actually mean and measure? So ROAS, return on ad spend, measures the revenue from ad spend divided by the total ad spend itself. This may or may not include your management costs, depending on how the agency is calculating it. So I'm going to share my screen with the workbook, which again, you can download in the link below. Highly recommend following along with it and putting in your own numbers. So let me pull that up and we'll do a quick example. All right, so now we're on the 4th tab of the calculator of the workbook. So you can see we still have our data from the previous chapters here. So now we're going to put in ad spend. So this is the amount that you have literally spent in a given period. I'd recommend using like 1 month for this data. So let's put in your ad spend. This could be either with or without your ad management cost. In this example, we're going to pretend that you're managing ads yourself, so we're not going to include it. However, if you do have an ad manager, I would recommend putting that into this calculation. So let's say that you spent $5,000 in ads and you got $15,000 in revenue you can attribute from the ads back. So this could be revenue you've attributed from simple conversion tools like Google Tag Manager if you're an e-commerce site. Or it could be using more advanced methods, like if you're a service business where you have custom phone numbers linked to only your ads, so you can track how many people called in and then how many people converted into customers, and then how much did they actually spend. So in this case, we're going to say we got 15,000, and let's say that this was over 75 customers. So now looking down here, we could see our ROAS, which is your revenue from your ads divided by your overall ad spend, was a 3. This would be considered healthy by most marketing companies' standards. And then your CAC, your cost to acquire a customer, was $200. But going back to our LTV here, LTV calculator, we could see that with this example, that $200 CAC combined with your other cost means that you're generally going to have that almost 9-month ROI period to pay back. So this is how you end up in trouble with cash flow, because your marketing company said you had a positive ROAS that was within industry standard. In this case, that would probably be true. Your CAC was a reasonable amount for your industry, probably true as well, but that does not help with your cash flow in any given way. And you've got to go and figure out how to make this problem better, whether it's to bring in outside financing, whether it's to increase your prices. But this is where a lot of business owners get into trouble, where they're chasing growth through marketing, and then they are growing, but they actually shoot themselves in the foot when it comes to cash flow. So now we're going to tie everything together. So we know our cost per customer that is not related to marketing. So here in this example, we've got the $71 of variable cost per customer. your $20 per customer fixed cost attribution. Then here we know our total AOV, so we have that in this case. We've got our purchase frequency, our lifespan, our customer acquisition costs that we're actually paying, at least according to this part. And then our calculations. So LTV, $1,200. Your overall combined cost is essentially the $291 to acquire a customer, and then also support and maintain them, and then actually to deliver the product to them. We have a $33.33 average monthly revenue coming in from each of those customers. And this is, again, your extremely long payback period before you're profitable. So going over to max CAC. As you can see, all of the numbers have been pulled in here automatically. So we've got all those here, including your profit. And this is where you can put in your own metrics. You can see if you're within your target window. So I'm going to put in even 6 months here for our target payback. And what we need to do now is figure out how can we go and make the cash flow from this make sense. And what I would advise you to do is to go over to the LTV and cash flow window here. And these are going to be some of your main numbers to mess with. So real quick first, your CAC here, this is pulling from the LTV and cash flow sheet. This way we can just make our adjustments there and we can see if they're effective here. Let's just make that 12. So they are purchasing once per month. And let's say that it is, instead of 3 years, 1 year. So as you can see, we've changed nothing when it comes to your LTV, but we've completely modified your cash flow of when you are receiving of that customer. So this might look like a change in business model where you're being more aggressive and pushing an upfront cost, or you're trying to have more of a subscription model, anything like that. But as you can see, we're now down to 2.9 months. And if we go back over here, we are well within our payback target period. We're still making the same profitability, but now let's do an even more extreme example. Let's change this to even 1. So we're going to have 1 purchase per year. We're going to have, again, 3 years. So we'll say that the customer lifetime is the same. But now let's change our AOV. So this would be the example of raising your prices. So in our previous example, our customer was worth $1,200 over 3 years. That would be $400 a year on average what they're worth. So let's say that we change up some of our numbers. In the first year, that's a $400 AOV just for that first year. So we're not going to change the lifespan. We're going to assume that's the same. But let's say that we are, instead of charging quarterly, we are charging the entire year up front and giving even a fairly steep discount. So we're going to change this to 1. Let's say that we give those customers 20% off of that $400 for that first year that they would have paid if they're paying quarterly. Let's say that that's $32,000 that we are collecting in that upfront time period over that same 100 customers. And our AOV is now $320. We've put 1 order per year, indicates basically that was paid upfront for the year instead of paid quarterly. And from there, you can see that our payback period is now 1, even though our AOV is less. We go back to our max CAC calculator. We see that profit has actually gone down. It's gone down from 909 to 669. However, our cash flow is significantly improved in this situation to the point where we can now reinvest in marketing significantly. Let's go through another scenario of just raising the price without changing the structure of payments. So let's put that back to quarterly. And let's assume that instead of that $10,000 that was here originally, so going back to this, we're now going to put in $15,000. So let's say that we just increased our prices by 50%. I've got an entire another video about pricing. If you're interested, it's in the link below in the description. You wouldn't jump it by 50% normally. You would creep it up and you would make sure that you're measuring everything, including your conversion rate. But just for the sake of this experiment, let's say that you did jump your price by 50% per order value. So your AOV is now 150. And now we're at 6 months. So going back here, we've met our 6 month target. However, if our target is 3, we would still not meet that target. We are more profitable now, though. There is something to note. You can make a longer payback period work with your business. You just have to make sure that your cash flow supports it, and this will slow your growth. Let's say that you're making your $50 per month on average, even if it's in quarterly payments. That's fine. Once those customers have paid themselves off, so they've paid back the $291 we're incurring here, you can at that point use that profit from them to slowly increase your marketing. Like I said, this will severely limit your growth. However, this is a way that you could bootstrap a business that is in this cash flow scenario. There is obviously one other thing that you can do to go and solve this problem beyond taking on outside capital. And that would be to decrease your CAC. So this would involve making your marketing more efficient and demanding more from your marketing agency. So let's go back over here to the ROAS calculation. So I'm not going to worry about ROAS right now, but let's say that you were trying to increase your marketing efficiency. So you go and talk to your marketing agency, say that a CAC of 200 is too high. We need to lower that so we can afford to reinvest more into marketing. They say, okay, we're going to optimize a few things. Let's see what we can do. And let's say that they get that down to 120 per customer acquisition. So now let's go over here. Let's put in 120 instead of that 200. As we can see, we've dropped from 9 to 7 months. Still not great, but it's an improvement. So let's say that we go up a little bit more. Let's say we go to 100. So now we're down to 6 months. So much better situation. We've carved off 3 months of our ROI time period. Same thing here. So we're at 6. That would put us in the green, and we're still showing profitability. We're actually showing more profitability if we can get the marketing more efficient. So this is where this becomes a management tool, both so you know what you can actually afford to spend with your CAC, and on top of that, what type of cash flow situation are you in? So now that we've gone through those examples, you should have a better understanding of how to think through these decisions and use all of this combined data to make marketing decisions from a data-driven perspective, not a gut feeling perspective. When talking to your marketing agency, you need to know what can you realistically afford to pay per customer acquisition. And then on top of that, what does your payback period look like? Because you might be in scenario 1 where you're perfectly happy with the profitability of your marketing and of your overall business, but you need to figure out how to accelerate your cash flow in order to grow rapidly. So an example of this might look like bringing in a factoring agency, factor some of your receivables. So they might charge you 20% to go and take the next year's worth of revenue and give it to you up front, but you might be willing to pay that in order to more aggressively grow. Or you might be willing to take on outside loans or take on investors, or you might need to actually change your business model to facilitate that rapid growth, and that way you're able to get more of your money up front. So if you found value with this and you have a better understanding of how to make marketing decisions based off of your core marketing metrics, definitely subscribe to the channel. If you want my help actually figuring this out and walking through the strategy with you, you can book a call with me directly on my website. That is ZacharySenz.com, and I'll see you in the next video.